Awesome. Well, welcome everyone to our Career Insights panel on exploring careers in the legal field. My name is Jarellis. I'm an advisor and program coordinator at Beyond Barnard. One of the things that I focus on is on our Career Insights series. And this is our last Career Insights of the semester. Students, I'm sure that you are beginning to wrap up all of your finals and your classwork that you have due. So we really thank you for your time here today. The hour goes super quickly, so I am going to turn it over to Jody to introduce herself and also hand it over to our panelist.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jody Dublin. I am one of the Associate Directors of Advising and Programs here at Beyond Barnard. I am the Graduate and Professional School Lead. So if you ever have questions about grad school, law school, whether you should go to one or both of those, please feel free to reach out to me on Handshake or via email. I'll give you my email at the end of the session. I'm very happy to be hosting this. By a show of hands, has anybody did anybody attend the pre-law overview on Monday? You can just do your little virtual hand. All right, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. I know that we have a packed program today, so I hope all of you brought your juicy questions. I can't wait to get started. And we are going to start off by just asking the panelists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what you do and how you got there. So I'm going to start out with Olimpia. Can you tell us, and then you can kick it over to another panelist.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. I graduated from Barnard in 1999. And after that, through the serendipity of the binders in the career services, I applied to a paralegal position here, in New York, at the Department of Justice. And as destiny would have it, they sent my resume to a section within the criminal division in Washington, D.C. And all of a sudden, my whole trajectory changed, and I had no intention of moving to Washington, D.C., but then I started working at the criminal division, which focused on, my work there focused on training prosecutors, judges, and investigators in Latin America, which was so fulfilling. And through that opportunity, I was able to meet a lot of prosecutors and learn about their work. And I was so impressed with how what they did impacted their community in a positive way. And so after 2 years at the Department of Justice, I went to Columbia Law School. And then after law school, I did various things. I worked at a law firm for a couple of years. And then I went to a fellowship. I did a fellowship here again in DC for a congressperson who worked in the judiciary. And this was another serendipitous event in my career. I did not focus on civil rights at all while I was in law school, but as luck would have it, I ended up covering the reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act for the congressman. And through that whole process, I ended up meeting attorneys from the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. I had never heard of the Civil Rights Division, had, again, no civil rights background, but after I met with them and I networked with them, when an opportunity became available, they told me apply. And that was the beginning of my career at the Department of Justice. And I'm a huge cheerleader for the Civil Rights Division. I've been here for almost 14 years, and it's just been so rewarding and fulfilling. I started off in the voting section, and so I did voting rights work for 5 years. And a lot of my work there involved language access issues, making sure that voters who were limited English proficient had all of the materials they needed to cast a vote, and also challenging voting maps that were going to have a detrimental effect on the ability of minorities to vote within those districts. And so that was wonderful, but I still held on to that desire to be a criminal prosecutor. And so again, through great fortune, it turns out that there is a section within the Civil Rights Division that does prosecutorial work. It's the only criminal section within the division, and it's the criminal section. And so through a process called open season, I was able to apply an interview to switch from the voting section to the criminal section. And I've been in the criminal section now for about 8 years, and the work is entirely different. So for most of these 8 years, I focused on prosecuting hate crimes and police brutality and official misconduct cases throughout the country. And recently, I switched to the human trafficking prosecution unit. And so now I'm focused on labor trafficking and sex trafficking offenses. And one of the reasons why I'm such a big cheerleader for the Civil Rights Division is because you get to do such fulfilling mission-oriented work. And so if you have any questions about civil rights or the Civil Rights Division, please feel free to contact me. And I guess I'll turn it over to Jessica.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. My name is Jessica Horan-Block. I graduated in 2005 from Barnard, and I am still here in New York City, though I've done a bunch of traveling. Hearing Olimpia talk reminded me actually how I got my first job, which was through a Barnard grad. I actually lived in India for a year after I graduated from Barnard, and then I came back and I was looking for a job, and I knew I wanted to do a job working with people and underserved and marginalized communities. And I talked to a friend who had a legal internship at Safe Horizon, which is a victim services here. And so she was a Barnard grad, and she was like, oh, they're looking for a job for like an entry paralegal job. And so I interviewed with a Barnard grad who was on her way to law school, and she handed off, I got the job and she handed it off to me. So it was very seamlessly Barnard. And yeah, I worked there for 3 years as a paralegal at a domestic violence law project. Through that, I sort of learned the complicated nature of, what we call domestic violence, and that it's not always as clear cut as we think. The community I worked with in Brooklyn and in the Bronx primarily spoke Spanish, and I did not speak Spanish. And so I applied to law school, but then I decided to defer a year, and I got a Rotary scholarship. So I lived in Ecuador for a year in an immersion program to learn Spanish, which happened to be now in retrospect one of the greatest decisions I made, because I work with a ton of lawyers who frankly wish they spoke Spanish. And so then I applied to law school, and I know we're going to talk about why we decided what law school, but I ultimately decided on going to Temple Law School in Philadelphia for a number of reasons, but mostly because I knew I wanted to do litigation. And I went to Temple, and I had an internship doing housing defense work. And then I had an internship at the Bronx Defenders, which is a big public defender organization here in the Bronx, in their family defense practice, which was where I work now. So I had an internship there, and they offered me a job when I was coming out of law school in 2011. So I've been at the Bronx Defenders actually since 2011. I defend parents. I'm a public defender, so I defend parents who are being investigated or accused of abuse or neglect by ACS in Bronx Family Court. But now I've been there for a while, so I am the director of complex litigation for that practice. So I really work with our clients that are being charged with the most serious of charges, whether it be physical child abuse or sex abuse. My specialty right now is defending parents when they're in sort of cases that are forensic based. So if a parent is accused of shaken baby syndrome or other things that I'm sure you see in the news all the time, that the Innocence Project does work sort of with forensic science and debunking junk science. There's a huge case right now that's all over the news, Melissa Lucio. I don't know if you saw, it's been in the New York Times, but I actually helped a friend at the Innocence Project with that case. So that's sort of the work I do. So I'm a public defender. I consider myself a public defender. I've been doing it for 11 years. I absolutely love it. It's certainly a particular lifestyle, and I know we're going to talk about that. But thank you for having me, and it's so nice also to hear from Olimpia, and I'm excited to hear about from all the other, my Barnard sisters who are in law.
Okay, Isidis, do you want to go next? Oh, you're muted.
Oh, yes, I am. Well, I just want to say thank you, Jody and Yarelis, for organizing this, and for the students for participating. Again, my name is Isidis Isaac, and I graduated from Barnard in 1992. And while at Barnard, I was always interested in issues concerning human rights and issues of justice and fairness and power differentials and all those kinds of issues. When I got to Barnard, I also loved science, and I thought I wanted to be into science, but then I didn't do so good. So I said, okay, I'm going to stick to writing, and I enjoyed that very much, in critical analysis, and decided that I would apply to law school my last year of Barnard. So I only applied to schools locally. I didn't really have a good set out plan. I just sort of put out applications that were kind of had late deadlines. And fortunately for me, I was able to get into Rutgers Law School in Newark. And there I found a nice community of people who were committed to doing public interest work. We had Arthur Kanoy, the late Arthur Kanoy, and Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was the one that established a women's rights law reporter, which I was able to sort of lead in my last year. And so I was able to get some of my fix satisfied in terms of the dealing with public interest issues. I volunteered in Newark at the time. The issue of HIV was really significant, doing kinship foster care, trying to figure those issues out at the time. I also got to do a judicial internship with Chief Judge Dolores K. Slobiter in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. And that was really wonderful, although I had to commute to Philadelphia twice a week, but it was really great. I enjoyed the writing and the analysis. After graduating, my first attorney job was working for the HIV Law Project. I was interested in sort of international human rights law, and so I did some, volunteered with the Women's Environment and Development Organization. That was Bella Abzug at the time, and that I thought that's probably where I should, try to put my energy into to get into, but that didn't seem like it was feasible, and that I really needed to just stick locally. And so I, got employment with the HIV Law Project and represented my clients in immigration proceedings and in housing court. My clients were, really in desperate situations, and oftentimes there was little relief available, but we just had to come up with something. And that really was very meaningful work to me. And it's, for me, the most sort of significant work I've done to date. I also, subsequent to the HIV Law Project, I went to Brooklyn Legal Services in the Williamsburg office in the HIV unit, doing the same work, but in that catchment area, even though sometimes we represented people all throughout Brooklyn, if some other legal services office couldn't handle that case for whatever reason. And so that was also really wonderful. And I got to be a part of the community there and get involved with the different community-based organizations and some of the politics and so forth to try to secure our funding. Because of funding issues, then I had to go to District Council 37. And eventually I found myself working as a court attorney in the state Supreme Court, worked for about 18 years, mostly in criminal court, which I enjoy. It was like a movie, some of these trials, if I could tell you, some of the facts there. But again, I enjoy that. It was allowed me to be neutral and to look at the issues and do that kind of analysis and, get to really make a difference, which is really what motivated me. I remember when I was at Barnard, one of the deans asked me, well, what do you want to do? And I remember saying, oh, I just want to make a difference. And I thought it was really hokey or whatever. But honestly, that's really what I wanted to do. And I've been able to do that. I'm grateful for that. And, you know, working with the court and being able to, you know, help sort of, you know, vacate wrongful convictions and sort of help, you know, with setting precedent and those kinds of things. And so, you know, yeah, that's my journey. And I'm trying to find myself now, you know, in another arena.
Thank you. And I think our last lawyer today is Bethany. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, of course. Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really honored to be among the rest of you guys. You all do really important work, and I feel that mine is not going to measure up. So it's very different from what all of you do. I am an employment lawyer, and I work for Paramount Pictures. I'm their in-house employment counsel. I graduated from Barnard in 1998. My degree is in Russian studies, which is not at all related to what I do now. I spent some time in Russia after I graduated from Barnard and came back when their economy collapsed back in 1998, 99. And decided I wanted to move somewhere warm. I grew up in Buffalo and I had just been in Moscow and I wanted to move somewhere warm. So I moved to Los Angeles, and at the time I got a master's degree from USC at night in communications management and worked during the day as a legal assistant in the general counsel's office at what at the time was Artisan Entertainment, is now Lionsgate Entertainment. They were just coming off their big hit, The Blair Witch Project, if any of you remember that. So it was a good time to be there. Unfortunately, the movies they made after that did not do so well. And as I was leaving the company, they were shortly thereafter bought. But I worked on all sorts of litigation type matters. I was litigation support for the in-house attorney there, which exposed me to a variety of things in the entertainment world, in the legal world. And I wasn't sure if it was for me, to be honest, after I was done with my 2 years there, and I applied to law school. I ended up moving up to San Francisco. I went to University of California, Hastings College of the Law. My main decision in choosing that school over a private school was, at the time, it was really affordable to go to school there. And I was a California resident. I believe by the time I graduated, my tuition was $15,000 a year, which is unheard of now. And I didn't know if I wanted to do something that was going to, you know, I didn't know where my career path was going to lead me, and I was hoping to minimize my debt. It makes me very sad that that's not really an option available to people now. I think it really leads to people not being able to choose careers they may want because of finances. And anyways, I'll get on my soapbox about that some other time. But so I ended up, I thought I might want to explore immigration law. My first summer in law school, I did an internship with what at the time was INS, which is now ICE. I worked in the division where the government was basically opposing asylum claims that people were bringing. And it was really interesting. And I found that the people who worked for their government, sadly, I feel like a lot of them got really jaded really quickly. And I just didn't think it was for me. And so when my second and third year of law school, I did take some employment law classes. I found them interesting. I did an employment law clinic. I really just wanted to get a job when I graduated from law school. And I didn't get a job through the traditional on-campus interviews that many people you may have heard of. And so I hearkened back to my experience at Artisan Entertainment, and I recalled the names of, you know, a lot of the lawyers who were outside counsel that we worked with. And I really just wrote letters to every single one of them, asking if I could meet with them for an informational interview, if they had any, you know, openings. And I did get some informational interviews, and eventually one firm said, actually, like, we'd like to talk to you. What do you think? And so Jackson Lewis, which is a national law firm in they're all over the country, but their Los Angeles office is the largest. They interviewed me and brought me on as a summer associate for my second year. And that's where I started my career. I was there for 9 years. I worked in employment law. It's usually divided between traditional labor, which is the union world, or union, you know, issues, and then litigation, employment litigation, and advice and counsel. I didn't really do any traditional labor. I did the employment law, litigation and counsel aspect, and I enjoyed it. But I thought at some point The litigation life was not for me. It's, you know, as you may have heard, it's, you know, your life is a little unpredictable because the court sort of determines your schedule, and it could be very last minute that you're canceling a vacation or all your life plans or whatever it is. And my husband and I were planning on starting a family. And so I just thought I wanted something different. So I was actually supposed to go work in-house for a client of the firm, and then they did a reorganization and that opportunity fell through, which was disappointing. But shortly thereafter, I actually just heard from a friend that Paramount was hiring, and I threw my hat in the ring and I got hired, and I've been here 9 years now. So I'm not someone who jumps around a lot. I've had, you know, 2 legal jobs in my career, but my job has changed a lot since I've been here. You know, we are part of the larger, well, it used to be called Viacom, and then it became Viacom CBS, and now it's called Paramount Global. So I'm one of a team of employment lawyers that support the business. My client is Paramount Pictures. So I manage litigation, provide advice and counsel, manage immigration for the entire company, but most of my other stuff is limited to Paramount Pictures. And with the exception of production stuff, I don't do the advice and counsel on the production, employment, legal day to day. I am an employment lawyer first. I happen to work in the entertainment business and the entertainment client, but I don't do, you know, I'm not someone who's rubbing elbows with Tom Cruise on a daily basis or anything like that, although I have seen him on our lot. But that's where I am at, and that's where I've been, and hopefully I'll stay here until they kick me out.
Thank you all so much for sharing. And I think, Bethany, you had talked about, you know, kind of having a trajectory that was like a little bit different than maybe like a traditional. And I think something that we really try to it kind of impart to students as they're going through this search in this period of their, you know, they're figuring out what they want to do, that there is no one way to get into law, right? All of your trajectories can look different. And especially the piece about having, you know, studying Russian studies, you know, it's something that students would not generally think, but look at where you're at now. And I think that that is a testament to kind of say, like, you can start off wherever, it's not linear. And get to the same spot essentially. So really, thank you for sharing that. We are going to go straight into our next question that I have for you all. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about what are the key skills and or competencies that are essential to your field. So essential to your day-to-day work. And any one of our panelists can kind of get us started.
If you'd like, I guess I could start. For me, it's really writing and critical analysis. You have to be able to communicate effectively. It's about being able to, you know, be persuasive and get across your thoughts in a way that is really easy and simple, and it just is sort of through osmosis. That's the most sort of effective way of impacting people is, you know, being able to be effective in your communication. And that is particular, I think, in the work that I do with writing. You know, as along with that is the research, which is something you just learn through, you know, practice. But I think, you know, researching critical thinking, you want to put that to work. So your philosophy classes, your writing classes, everything that you do. And just to point out, I was a foreign area studies major. I studied Latin America, you know, pre-Columbian art and architecture, and it was just about writing and just being really good at communicating in whatever context. So that's my bit.
I guess I can go next. Our work in the criminal section is 80% investigation, and I know it's surprising, but a lot of what I do is working with federal agents and victims and witnesses in order to put together our cases. And so in that spirit, being able to communicate with people effectively and connect with people and getting them to trust you and tell you the horrible things that they've experienced, that is one of the key skills that you have to have in my job. The other key skill is that you have to be a natural diplomat, because as I mentioned earlier, our cases are everywhere. So I've had cases in Wyoming, West Virginia, Texas, everywhere. And so a lot of times you go into rural communities, and as a woman of color, you know, it's something that you think about, or communities, urban communities, all kinds of communities. And so you have to be able to build that trust and build that relationship with many different kinds of people. And another thing is I constantly work with new teams, because frequently we prosecute our cases with local prosecutors. And then I have to build relationships with the local prosecutors and the new agents on the case. And so it's constant diplomacy. So I would say for me, it's just being able to communicate, to connect, and to be a skilled diplomat, and, you know, just try to get the work done and get the evidence.
So I think I'm going to jump in and ask a related question, which is, what are some outside of work experiences that you've had that have contributed to your skills, either while you were in law school or in your legal profession now?
If you'd like me to start. I think maybe some of the volunteer work that I've done in instances where I've had to deal with the public, if I'm working with, say, with the court and doing the work with the help center or something like that. And even with the attorneys and, you know, people who approach the court to sort of figure out what to do, you know, volunteering, let's say in a soup kitchen place where there's a crowd of people and I'm giving out stuff, you know, giving out food, excuse me, and just, you know, trying to manage, you know, the demands of people and just engaging the public pretty much. And in addition to that, I think I took a class, not a class, yeah, class, how do you say, improv, you know, an improv class. And that, again, allows you to sort of be comfortable in, you know, having the stage and being seen in that sort of space where you're dealing with the public and you're communicating to a large group of people.
I would say law school experience-wise, things that contributed to, you know, that were useful, helpful, were the employment law clinic that I mentioned. That was really great, especially because it exposed me to a lot of a very hot area of law in California, which is wage and hour law. And that's it was a great thing to be exposed to before I even got into the firm world. I also did an immigration law clinic, which was really great as well, because you know, it sort of helps you to weed out what you like and what you don't like. And I thought, you know, that was a great way to learn that, and to see the sort of human side of, you know, having seen the government side, seeing the other flip side of it was interesting. And then the other thing I would say is, before I actually transferred into Barnard, I started my first year of college at Indiana University as a voice performance major. And so, you know, being comfortable being up in front of people and presenting is something that was, you know, having that background was helpful for me. And especially now I do a lot of training with our teams on various employment laws and what have you. And that is something that I do carry into my day to day.
I can just share one thing, which is that, like, one thing we train a lot about at my office is how to persuade, right? And how to persuade your fact finder, your jury, or your judge. My job is very, very, very litigation based. And I think, as Bethany pointed out, that means I have a very unpredictable life. And pros and cons of that, a lot of cons, especially if you have a family. But I have learned that the way to persuade is through storytelling, right? To marshal all of the facts and to tell a story to eventually get the fact finder to come to the conclusion you want, right? Or I deal with people who are accused of very serious things that often are not true, or it is the worst moment of their life. And my job is to explain that this particular moment, if true, does not define who the person is, and to bring the human aspect to a courtroom. And I think the best way to do that is through storytelling, usually. And ironically, like, some of the best ideas and idioms and things I've gotten have been through watching movies and reading books with my children, because it's just stories, right? At the end, you feel a certain feeling. You feel empathy for the characters, or you feel a particular thing. So I know that sounds funny and trivial, but I sometimes use those lessons, because if I can't tell a good story, I'm going to lose.
And I guess the one thing that I learned is just own who you are. Even, in my situation where I go into all these different environments, I think that if I try to be anyone but who I am, a Latina from New York, it's going to come across as phony. And that kind of limits your ability to connect with people. And so just be comfortable with who you are. Of course, be professional and, but I think it was just getting to that level where I'm comfortable. And even when it comes to litigation styles, we have trainings where people tell you, oh, do this, do that. But if it's not your style, it's not going to work. And so you have to figure out who you are and just be comfortable with it. And that's the face that you put forward.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I think Bethany kind of touched on this a little bit, so we're going to switch gears. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your law school experiences. So one, what was the rationale behind choosing the law schools that you attended? And two, if you can tell us a little bit more about your experience as a whole, if there were any internships, clinics, or any extracurricular activities that overall contributed to your experience. And anyone can start us off again.
I can start. So I did not attend any sessions of Barnard career, and I did not really have an idea of what career I wanted. So I applaud all of you that are here. So that's all to say, like, you can have no idea and it's fine. Like I lived in India and then just wanted to like get a job and live in Brooklyn with my friends, which by the way was like the most fun time ever. So please do that. But you can just have a job that pays bills and like not think about the future for a little bit. And that's fine too. But I went to Barnard and it was difficult financially for my family. And so my parents were very clear that for law school, they were not going to be paying. And so I frankly picked the law school that I felt like was the best fit for me, but that was also gave me the most scholarship. So that was because I worked with a bunch of public interest lawyers for many years at Safe Horizon that were saddled with debt. And I knew about loan forgiveness programs, but I also heard that they weren't amazing. And I'm seeing some nods. So and Temple, where I applied, had an excellent trial advocacy program and an excellent skills program. And I knew I wanted to do litigation, and they gave me the best scholarship. And they had a public interest community. So I know that sounds simple, but I really did not want to come out of law school with a mountain of debt. I totally agree with a lot of what Bethany said about debt. And so I was lucky enough to get a large scholarship there. And so I got into some higher ranked schools, but in the end, I chose the school that I felt like I could afford. And I'm really happy I made that decision because and I made that decision before federal loan forgiveness, and I'm one payment away from federal loan forgiveness, which is amazing because you know what, we haven't had to pay it for a long time. So sorry, I'm very excited. I love that program. But still, I still have some debt, but it's much lower than a lot of my colleagues at Bronx Defenders and my colleagues in private practice. So that's how I made that decision. And I actually really liked law school. I took 4 years off, so I didn't go directly to law school. And Temple is a very skills-based school. So that was what I wanted. I wanted to learn how to do something, to have a skill to assist people. And by the way, I was a Middle Eastern Studies major, so that really wasn't related, which was very interesting. I loved it. But again, I think multiple people have pointed out that you never know. So that's it. But I think I had that fortune of working with lawyers who told me, go to a school that you can afford and be a top student there, right? And it's okay. You don't have to go to your best law school. Like, there's more to the decision. And so I just wanted to put that out there because that was really great advice somebody gave me, and it has meant that I'm not saddled with $300,000 of debt.
So I guess I can speak next. I did not get that advice. The advice that I got was go to the best school you can get into. And that's the advice that I followed. Fortunately for me, it turned out okay because, you know, of the circumstances, like I was able to work at a law firm. And so for a couple of years, and so that helped. But I chose Columbia because I had been in DC for 2 years, and I thought at that time it was a village. And so my main goal was to go to a good law school, but also to return to New York. And I was fortunate enough to get into Columbia, which was a great school. And I'm really thankful. And like I said, it did work out, but I want to also focus on the fact that the advice that I got is not the advice that I give. I think it's very, very important to think about what you want to do after law school, and debt is real. And I know a ton of people who went to law school not really knowing if they wanted to be a lawyer. And then when the market just completely collapsed in 2008, had all of this debt and no job opportunities. And that can happen at any point. And so I would say, just like Jessica and Bethany, that you have to consider the financial aspect of it very carefully. Like I said, it worked out for me. But it doesn't mean that it'll work out for everyone. I just got lucky. And so, yes, it's good to go to a top school if you can, if it makes financial sense, because, I had a great time and I learned a lot at Columbia, but it's not, again, it's not the advice that I give. It's just consider what you want to do and make sure you want to be a lawyer, because I hear a lot, if you don't know what you want to do, just go to law school. If you're thinking maybe you want to go into public policy, go to a public policy school and you save, 1 year of tuition. It's 2 years versus 3 years. Like, all of these things are very practical, but my advice would be consider what you want to do after law school, and then also make sure you want to go to law school, because it's a time commitment, it's a financial commitment. And so just make sure that that's what you want to do. And the best way, I think, to do that is to get some experience, to take some time off, and to see what it's like the day-to-day, because like I said, it's a big commitment.
I would also say, to piggyback on some of this, is that, I was nowhere near the top of my class at Barnard, and I was nowhere near the top of my class in law school. And, it doesn't define me as an attorney and how good I am at my job now. And, your law school may get you your first job. It may, open you to opportunities just because of a name, but people move around jobs so often now that beyond that, it's like after the first few years, it doesn't really matter to a lot of people what your first job was. And, how you did in law school, it matters for your first job. Beyond that, as long as you're doing good work, nobody cares. I mean, not saying you should go, but, I don't want it's a stressful time being in law school, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Coming from Barnard, we're all very high achievers, and we really want to do the best work that we can. But it ends up okay, even if you don't end up at the top of your class.
I went to law school immediately after graduating from Barnard. And I remember not wanting to take any time off, feeling like, oh no, I have to just keep going. And, I didn't want to go and find employment. I thought that was not, going to be practical. It wasn't going to be a good use of my time, or maybe I just didn't want to deal with the real world. I don't know. But I just wanted to just go, straight from, undergrad to grad school. And I had gone away during that winter and came back and submitted my applications and was able, and got into Rutgers. And I remember, that the impression that I had was that it was a strong public interest school. It was close by, it wasn't going to be far, and it was very affordable. Luckily I don't have any debt, and whatever loans I had to take, it was very manageable. But I really actually regretted just going straight into law school. Reflecting now, even soon after graduating from law school, I felt like I should have taken some time. Maybe I should have, do some teaching, or, for me, I think that may have been in my interest, because I felt at the end of law school, I took the bar exam that summer. And fortunately for me, I was able to pass, but I had to like stop at that moment and just take a break because I felt really overwhelmed. I don't know what it was. Maybe, I just been going to school all these years and, bam, 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 study for the bar. And then it was like, abruptly everything came to an end. I was like, oh, I just needed to take a break. So at that point I did. But I think it's worthwhile to just reflect on what it is that you want and really get a clear idea about your path and, what moves you and what makes sense, and not just doing something just because some artificial, construct. You just have to keep going. You have to keep going. You have to, no. That's my.
Thank you all so much. I think we have time for one more question from our panelists as we get questions that are coming in. Students, I really encourage you, start thinking about things you want to post for our panelists. This is such a great opportunity to do what I like to call low-level networking. And this is just a wonderful opportunity. You have all this wisdom right here. Might as well use it. So before we go into our Q&A portion, one more question I wanted to ask you all. What role does mentorship, if any at all, or networking play in your professional life? And anyone can start.
Okay, I guess I'll start. I would say it's been so important in my career. Like I mentioned earlier today, the reason why I was able to get back to DOJ was because of a networking opportunity. Again, and it changed the path of my career, just making those connections with people in the civil rights division. And it was, again, serendipity, but it took time to cultivate that relationship and to keep in touch so that when the opportunity became available, they thought of me. And so I frequently give advice to reach out to people who you admire, who you see yourself doing what they do, and send them an email and try to talk to them. And I know I've talked to a number of Barnard students who are interested in the law, and also people from my law school who are interested in working in government or public interest. And I think that it's scary, right? Because you don't want to not hear back from the person, and you're maybe afraid, not afraid is not the right word, but it's intimidating. But I would say put yourself out there, because 9 times out of 10, you'll get a response, and people will be happy to open the doors for others. Like I said, I'm a huge cheerleader for the Civil Rights Division. And so if I can talk to anyone who's interested in doing the type of work we do, then it's wonderful. So I would say, yes, networking has been really important. And the last thing I'll add is that you never know who your mentors are going to be. One of my mentors for life is a white man from Iowa. And so who would have thought that this person was going to be so instrumental in my career? And so just be open-minded, build those relationships. You just never know who you're going to connect with and who's going to serve as your advocate.
I would also say, mentors have been incredibly important, especially as I've become went from a junior lawyer to more of a supervisor. There's different people that have given me advice, and people have given me advice that I think about now, especially also when I became a mom and a working mom. There was a lot of mentors in my office that helped me through that. But I would say that be brave in networking, especially if you see Barnard, someone has a relationship with Barnard, or I got the job at Bronx Defenders through a Temple Law School grad, right? But there's a lot of Barnard grads at Bronx Defenders. And every time I find one, I'm like, oh, really? And you have this moment where you're like, oh, you went to, I was texting with a woman who went to Barnard, who's graduated a few years after me. And I'm like, I'm going to a Barnard panel. She was like, oh, it's there's that connection there. It's of course you went to Barnard, you meet someone. And so I would just say, if you see that, and when you're Googling someone, you should really be brave and reach out, shoot people an email. I would always respond to someone. I live I live in Harlem, so I don't live terribly far from Barnard. And so whenever I meet someone from Barnard or have a connection, I'm always willing to just take some extra time. And so when you see someone has that in their background, I would just encourage you to be brave. And cold calling and cold emailing people has surprisingly worked a lot in networking and in my work.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that, I got my summer job that led to my 9-year job with my firm by just writing letters, so, who knows, right? When you send that letter, where it might lead. I think, a lot of times if you go to work for larger companies or firms now, they put into place official mentorship kind of programs where they team people up. I know, Paramount has that program available too. And so, you should make sure you take advantage of those, because oftentimes they will connect very junior people with very senior people, and you get great visibility and great advice. And, it's there to take advantage of. So if those things are available to you where you land, go for it.
All right, I think I'm going to jump in here because we have a question from the audience, and they want to know, and I think this is a great question for this group in particular. From your experience, how important was it to know another language?
I mean, I think I spoke about this because I did not speak another language leaving Barnard, and I'm so happy I speak Spanish. Like, I don't think I could do my job as effectively as I do it. Half of our clients only speak Spanish, and though we have access to translators, it's not the same. It's just simply not the same. You're not gonna build the same rapport or in the same way. And even if my clients speak English, their mom speaks Spanish, or their cousin speaks Spanish, or somebody. And so, so many of my coworkers say, like, their one regret was not learning a language. And I have many clients that don't speak English or Spanish, and I feel the difference, right? I have a client right now in a very serious case that speaks Senegalese Wolof. And so every time I want to talk to her, I have to find that particular interpretation. It's very hard to build a relation. I think Olimpia talked about how important building relationships are. And I totally agree with everything she said. And I think it's that much harder if you don't speak the language. So take the time. And also you get to travel. Like, you're not going to, the older you get, the older I get, the harder I think it is to travel. And I'm so thankful I had opportunities to live in India and Ecuador, which are two things that would just nearly be impossible now with 2 elementary age children. So.
I don't use my Russian in my work. It was certainly a curiosity that people would ask me about in interviews. So it made for interesting, door openers and discussions. But my life, I feel, has come full circle in a way in that our nanny speaks Russian, and my children are now both fluent in Russian. And so it's kind of like, I never thought I would use it again after I came back from Russia. And it's like not part of my work life, but it's part of my other life. And I think that's really cool. So if you have the opportunity, you never know where that might pop up in your life.
I would say that for me, so in terms of connecting with people, because of the nature of my work, even if I'm able to speak Spanish, the agents and, my other partners usually don't. And so we have to rely on interpreters for witnesses and victims that are Spanish speaking. But I must say that even then, just being able to, tell them in Spanish, look, I speak Spanish, and, I won't be able to talk to you, but I understand what you're saying, helps me to connect with them, I think, in a more profound way than if I didn't speak Spanish. So while I don't get to use it as much as I would like, it definitely helps in situations where the victims or witnesses are Spanish speakers. And I would just want to add that I'm a Latin American studies major. And so it's funny how all of us have that in common on the panel.
I'm sorry to be a Budinsky, but I also am a Latin American and Caribbean studies major. Best major ever. Sorry, everybody else. All right.
It's funny how we all did foreign studies as that we all focused on that in Barnard.
Yes. All right. So we have another question. If you could do one thing differently in your law school and or career experience, what would it be?
I think I sort of shared a little bit about that already. I would have taken some time off after graduating to sort of learn a little bit more about myself and just to get some sort of reflection and perspective. Um, but everybody's different. I thought that's probably what I needed to just go right into school, but I didn't plan right, or I don't think I planned, just the totality of myself. It's not simply just getting a degree. It's just like your being and who you are and what's going on with you and what you really want, where you are in life. So that's something I might have done differently.
All right. Another question from the chat. How did you go about studying for the LSAT when you started, and what resources do you recommend? Maybe if you've also mentored younger lawyers or lawyers that are, or law students, if you could talk about the advice that you give for studying for the LSAT.
I mean, briefly, I would say that it's my recollection of it. It's, I guess, the same, similar to like the bar in some ways. Not similar, but I would definitely take a course. I did both instances and do all the practice exams, because I'm told they sometimes repeat the questions, and you learn by doing those questions. And if you can also just sort of simulate the circumstances. If it's going to be at a particular location, go to that location so you can sort of take the like the stress out of it and just become familiar with the environment. Maybe, if you have access to it, sit down and time yourself and do a couple of the exams under those conditions, the time restraints, and just keep doing them and just give yourself a time frame and see how you are improving. And if you're not improving, you need to get assistance and really figure out why. That's my suggestion.
I would try to find a way you can focus. I think in your early 20s, it's like a very fun time. And I was working a full-time job in Brooklyn, like had a boyfriend. I was like not really interested in studying, it's like not my priority, which was fine. I did it, I got it done, I got what I got, right? But I treated the bar exam like a full-time job, for 3 months, and I had that privilege, right? I mean, I had a privilege not to work at that point. I didn't have that in Brooklyn. So if you can figure out a way to focus, and I agree, take as many practices as you can. And I remembered what I would change about my career as to the last question. Sorry, I was thinking about that. Like, what would I do differently? I think I would travel more if I had the resources. I think I really would. I really love traveling, and I really do think, at least in my life circumstance, it's much harder to travel now. And I think those are some of the best, most informative times of my life, was seeing other places and how other people live. And I think it's just easier to do when you're younger, both like physically and just like, I'm like, I can't believe I did that stuff, like, who was that person, right? And I think I would, if I could go back and tell my 23-year-old self, it would be like, go do some crazy travels that you'll never do now, which I know is probably more complicated with COVID. But you can really travel on the cheap when you're younger. So that's what I would do differently. It's not really career oriented, but life oriented.
It's close. I mean, it's important for your life, so that makes sense. And I think this is probably going to be our, okay, no, we have one more. Hi, I was wondering if the panelists have any recommendations for international students hoping to go to law school in the United States. Is not being a US citizen a large barrier to pursuing a legal career here?
I guess I don't have specific experience, but I know that in terms of my law school, they did have a program for international students, but it was, I know that it was through an LLM program. And so through that program, it allowed students who were from other countries to come to the United States and study law, get a master's in law. And it was a 2-year program. And after that, many of them would take bar exams and then get hired in the United States, and they were able to practice law that way. In terms of whether being a citizen or not is an impediment to going to law school, I'm not being a citizen, whether that would be an impediment. I don't think it would be. I know for government work, it's necessary, I think, to be at least a legal permanent resident. But for other types of work, I don't think that there are those requirements. And you certainly don't have to be a US citizen or legal permanent resident to go to law school. So I don't think that it's an impediment, but I do think that if pursuing government work is a little bit more challenging. Oh, and I wanted to add one thing about studying for the LSAT. The way that I remained focused is by getting a study buddy. It was someone that I was working with who was in the same position as I was, and we were going to apply to law school at the same time. So basically we made it like another job. We would designate days like Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever, and we would go together and we would go to the library and just take practice exams. And after we were done, we would treat ourselves to something yummy. And that was like how we were able to manage and stay focused. So I recommend getting a study buddy, just like, you know, people recommend getting a gym buddy. It really keeps you focused.
I was just going to mention on the foreign, I don't know, for foreign students, what, the law school piece of things, but, overseeing business immigration is part of my job for my company. And, when you do look for work, you will need to have a visa to work for any company. So, you should factor in that will probably be part of the equation. And hearkening back to the language discussion, if you do have language skills, a lot of firms are international now. And so having those language skills may be something that makes the firm willing to invest in supporting a visa for you, because you may have unique skills that someone else may not.
Okay, well, I want to thank everyone who was able to attend, and of course, all of our panelists for sharing their wonderful advice and experience. I don't know if you want to tell people how they can keep in touch with you. We can stop the recording so that doesn't get out.